let's talk a little bit about how you think about RFPs. Like maybe you could share a little bit of your learnings there
Mhm.
too.
Yeah, so I actually love doing RFPs. I think this is the information Doug gave me, right? I love to know, and I'm the nosy person, the nosy part of me. I love to know what's going on. So that leads to loving RFPs, and I've done RFPs before. So I worked at a small digital agency, if then, and that's when I was first exposed to either responding to an RFP or doing RFPs. I did RFPs at CNN, so I had process. I mean, over time, I built things that I thought, oh, this is a really cool idea. Let me do this too. And wait a minute, this isn't so great. So I didn't necessarily have a takeaway from this RFP process to say, oh, I did this. I probably shouldn't have. I already had a sort of a methodology. So the things that are important to me in an RFP, right? So one is like making sure that you gather information from all your stakeholders, right? You don't want to surprise someone, hey, look at all the stuff I did, and they had no idea, right? You don't want to be in that situation. So, involving people as soon as possible. Truly understanding what the problems are, right? So it's easy to say, hey, yeah, let's just find a new vendor. That's going to solve all our that's one way to think about things, but that's probably not going to be successful either. So, really understand what your problems are and what questions you're answering. So, those are all things that I think even before you start writing your essay, you go into. Uh, I think it's the preparation. Like, I think I had probably, I don't know, a 13-page document that I share with all my vendors or prospective vendors at the time to explain who Samsung was, the issues we're having, what we're looking for. Again, it was like 13 pages, and it had some legalese in there, perhaps like this is not getting this RFP and responding is not indicative, or doesn't say that we're going to have to accept you, all that, but it had lots of information. And part of me doing that was setting the table. I wanted to make sure all the vendors had or were coming back to me with the same information. So
Mhm.
that was something like just initial homework, like making sure all the vendors had the same information. I had very clear dates and timelines. So like I clearly pointed out, we're going to send out this RFP on the state. You have 3 days to respond to tell me if you want to participate. So I started doing things very clearly, very transparently, and it was across all vendors, right? When vendors had questions for me, every evening I would compile all the questions I got for the day and send them to all the vendors,
Mm.
right? So if, I don't know, if company A had a question, now all 6 vendors knew about it. And I did that routinely. I had a anonymous conference call, and some vendors took realized, "Oh, anonymous, well, maybe let me not sign in with my, Zoom background because that is no longer anonymous." It didn't matter for me, though. The premise was, I want all the vendors on the call so that they can hear the questions being asked and the answers. If you want to reveal who you are, that's on you. Doesn't really matter to me. But we had that type of engagement. So, I was very active. It's not like I put an RFP out there and said, let me wait, a month and see what comes back. It was a very involved process from day zero all the way to the end. And I think that helped. Like when I went through our responses in the Excel sheets, I would have questions and I would be reacting to, vendors as they would, share their answers. We had a couple of rounds of that also. So I was very involved. The team here at SoundCloud, various people were involved. I would say, this is what someone asked, what are your thoughts? So that all helped. So I think that those are the types of elements that helped us have a successful RFP where we found a vendor that we thought we could work with. I mean, that said, if all going through all that, if you didn't have the right vendor, I would be. I mean, okay, I wouldn't want to have to do it a year later, but that's okay too, right? So, it is a learning process, but hopefully, Daryl, that helps sort of answer
Yeah, no,
the
I've heard
question.
I've heard it put this way, which might resonate with you, but like the way that you make the decision or the decision-making process is what's really important. Sometimes the outcomes might not be what you wanted, but like if you took the time to, rigorously make the decision, you've done your best, And I think that's kind of how I interpret what you're saying.
I had over 200 questions, probably in 16 categories. I waited, like each question had a response. I waited, and it's not only myself. I had I think I probably, it's a lot, right? I weighted every single response, but I had a team of, say, like probably 5 different people, and they would maybe weigh or grade sections. But end of the day, I had a 1 to 5 on each response for 6 vendors. I had roll up weightings for the categories, and then I could tell you the scores of my 6 vendors and where they were strong, where they were not. And I also had conversations with the vendors if they were interested afterwards. Say, this is why you were selected, this is why you were not selected. So, it was really a full process. But I think, that also helped me make sure I wasn't really missing anything, right? So hopefully transparent for the potential vendors, but also for me to make sure that I was buttoned up as I should be.